In a previous episode, we repaired the dent in this lift gate, and today we're going to use this Evercoat body filler to straighten that dent. I'm going to share with you everything you need to know about body filler, how to mix it, how to apply it, in what situation, and what type of body filler you should use on your repair or restoration. So let's dig in and get started. Howdy, everyone. Chris here. Thanks for tuning in today's episode. If you're new to the channel, this channel is dedicated to teaching you everything you need to know about paint and body repair and how to do your own repair and restoration project at home. Unfortunately, over the years, body filler has gotten such a bad rap because techs are abusing it, using it improperly, and causing problems in a repair. So why do we even use body filler in a repair? Well, when you're straightening out metal, you're working that metal, you're pulling it out, you're stretching it, you're hammering it down, and you're going to create waves in that metal and imperfections. In order to get that repair straight, we use a thin coat of filler to lay over top of that and flatten it out. So when we go to apply our paint, it doesn't look like it's been repaired. Today I'm going to talk about 3 different types of filler that I typically use and some specialty fillers. This is Z-Grip. This is a premium lightweight filler. Very good quality filler that sands really well, and it's priced reasonably. A product like Z-Grip is going to be used for the bulk of your repair. Now, you always want to follow the technical data sheet that you have on a certain product, and here we're looking at the technical data sheet for Z-Grip, and you can see about the approved substrates, aluminum, galvanized steel, fiberglass, the preparation, and then the mixing instructions. It's a good idea to spend a little bit more money when you're going with a filler, just because it's going to make your life a lot easier when sanding, when preparing it for paint. It's going to have less pinholes, and it's going to be much smoother than an inexpensive filler. The next product or step I might use is to use a finishing putty or a glaze. Now, I like to use Icing. This is a real reliable finishing putty for me. It'll remove any imperfections in that body filler, like pinholes or deep scratches. It'll also flatten out that panel if you have a wave. Now, there's other products like this U-Pole Fantastic Glaze. That's a good product as well. Glaze can also be used over small dents. If you're not removing the paint, sometimes it can be used over paint. You have to check your technical data sheet, but you can sand it with 80 grit and then use a glaze or a finishing putty over a small dent. Now, the other product is a spot putty, and the spot putty is a non-catalyzed putty that air dries, and you can use it to fill pinholes or scratches. I don't typically use a lot of it. If you use a quality body filler and finishing putty, you're not going to get a lot of pinholes. Some of the other products I use are fiberglass fillers. I also use a flexible glaze for flexible plastic parts such as bumpers. Work really well for that. So this gives you a good rundown and a good idea of the basic types of fillers and what you can use on your repair. Later, we'll use an additive that we add to the Z-Grip to help thin it out a little bit. It might help you eliminate the purchase of a glazing putty when you're doing your repair. I prep the paint around the repair area with 80 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander. You want to have good adhesion for that body filler if you lay over the edge of the paint. Now, I like to lay my body filler over the edge of the paint. Now, I may not do it on my first coat. It may be on my second coat, because typically what I do is lay my first coat on to fill in all those low areas, shape it really quick, and then lay another coat on. So we want to clean it before you lay your filler in. I went ahead and used some spray away glass cleaner, washed it down, and now I'm going to tape up the area about 3 inches past where I want to lay my body filler. And I just do this to create a border so I know where to lay my filler. You don't really have to do this, and it's just something I'm playing around with. Let's go ahead and mix up some filler. The filler we're using today is the Evercoat Z-Grip. I really do like this filler. Now, this filler mixes up 50 to 1. That's 50 parts body filler, 1 part hardener. Now, if it's a hot day, it's 100 degrees today, I'm going to use less hardener. The reason for that, it's not going to harden as quickly. It's going to give me more time to work with the filler. Now, when you're mixing this filler in, the key is to not put any air in the filler. So you want to fold it in gradually until it's all one uniform color. You don't have any streaks. If you put air in it, stir it, you're going to put air in it, and that is going to cause pinholes, and it could create a problem down the road. Just going to create more work for you. So try and avoid mixing air into it. Now the filler's mixed, I'll take a little bit on the edge of my Bondo spreader. I'll start outside the repair area on one end and work my way across the repair area. and I'll just continue to do that until I feel like all the low areas are filled. Now, like I said, I like to put 2 coats on, at least 2 coats. I'll fill the low areas with the first coat and then sand it real quick, knock it down, and then put a second coat on. This is not by any means the only way to do it. This is how I like to do it. And the process I use, every tech's going to have their own process. If you do it a little bit differently, I want to hear from you. Let me know down in the comments below. The next step for me is to shape this body filler, and for that, I'm going to use my Orbital sander and some 80 grit sandpaper. You could use coarser sandpaper. It might be a little bit quicker. Some guys like to use 36, but that puts deeper scratches in it, and I try and avoid that if I can possibly do it. And this is very quick to do with some 80 grit and the Orbital sander. So now I'm just going to shape it. I'm just going to get the basic shape. We're not going to start blocking this until I have it basically straight. And then we'll start blocking it and refining it so we have a nice, super straight flat finish. By sanding this with the Orbital sander, I'm going to expose any low areas, and that'll give me an idea of where I need to lay some more filler. So I'm not going to try and shape the body lines. I'm just going to get an idea of where the body lines are, roughly shape those in, and then we'll fine tune those when we're blocking. Here I just switched over to my 3-inch palm sander with some 80 grit sandpaper to get some of those small flat areas. These areas can also be sanded by hand with a small round block, and we'll talk about that later. Now I'll go ahead and lay the second coat of filler, and then we'll talk about the next step. Okay, so we've got the second coat of filler on this, pulled out the dent, put 1 coat to fill the low areas, sanded that down with 80, and we're going over it again with 80, and I'm just roughing it in with the 80, and then we'll block this. I'm going to block it a little bit. It's pretty much shaped and filled, a couple little low areas here, but we're going to block that and see how that comes out. We'll use 80 to start with. Medium block, it's going to be able to cover enough area because this has a little bit of a contour, so I don't want a totally flat block that's not going to bend with this contour, so I'll use a short one and do sections, okay? I'm using 80 grit sandpaper on this Mirka vacuum system block. What we'll do is we want to block, of course, we have a body line here, we have a body line here, so we're going to do it in sections, flat sections first. So the bottom flat section, the middle one, and then we'll create this one a little bit. We'll worry about all the body lines and the contours when we get it straight. So once we get it straight, we can shape these body lines the way we want them. There's no use spending a lot of time trying to shape those before you get this panel straight. So we're going to block in an X pattern, simply like this, or they call this a crosshatch pattern. This allows it to get straight. So you want to block in different directions. You may see me go like this at some point. Okay, so before I start blocking this, I'm going to just put a little guide coat on here just so I can show you guys how this works. This is a powdered guide coat. We'll put this on here. This will show us our highs and our lows, mainly our lows. Just another tool to help you get this as straight as possible. After blocking it out, I have a few little waves I want to take care of. So I don't want to use a full strength filler. So I'm going to add this Evercoat Plastic Honey. This is going to thin out that Z-grip and make it easier to sand. We'll just add a little bit to the Z-grip. It doesn't take much to really thin it out. And we'll just fold that in, make sure it's all nice and mixed. And then we'll go ahead and put a little bit of hardener on our palette, mix that up, and then you can see how thin and how smooth this filler is now. It's almost like you're turning it into a glaze, okay? Because we just need a thin coat, this plastic honey works perfectly to thin out that body filler so it's not such a high build product. We'll go ahead and block it once again with 80 grit sandpaper. I'm still using 80 grit. We're going to knock it all down, get it flat, and then we'll switch over to 180.
Okay, so now we're going to address this contour. So we have this contour right here that's going to be difficult to sand with the traditional block. So we're going to use this round block that way with some 80 grit sandpaper. So we'll use this round block with some 80 grit sandpaper to get in that contour and just get that straightened out just enough so we can flatten this out and flatten this out. Still going in an X pattern. Maybe not to start with, but what I'll do is I'll also block this and then up. See how I'm kind of twisting it as I go? And we'll fine tune this with a little bit of glazing putty after we get it shaped properly. So now we have this pretty much shaped. I'm going to go around the outside with 180 to clean up the scratches on all of this. And then we're going to lay a thin coat of glaze here and maybe over here. Okay, so now we're going to block this a little bit with some 180 grit sandpaper. It's shaped pretty well. Our body lines are coming out nicely. So we'll block it out to remove some of these scratches, and then maybe a thin coat of glaze, very thin over this because it's really straight. Little imperfections here, but that'll come right out.
So I'll be blocking this in sections. I'll block the lower section first, making sure I don't block right on that body line. We're forming that body line by blocking in different sections. Now I've mixed up some finishing putty. This is the product called Icing that we talked about previously, and I'm just going to lay a thin coat over it. And what this is going to do is fill any scratches that we might have missed, some of those 80 grit scratches, any imperfections, any little pinholes. It's going to help with any little wave in the body filler. The best way I've found to lay filler in a contour like this is just to use your finger. I like to wear a glove, but it's just easier to smooth it in with your finger, make it as smooth as possible so it's easier to sand. I'll now sand over it with 180 grit sandpaper, blocking in an X pattern. We're also doing this to remove those 80 grit scratches, refine to 180, and then we'll go down to 320 before we primer. Now I'm going to sand in this contour again using 180 with that round block that I showed you earlier. We'll get this nice and smooth, and then we'll go over it with 320. The next step is to block the repair area with 320 grit sandpaper, and then I'll take my orbital sander and I'll machine sand the areas around that repair with 320 as well. Now I'm ready to mask this off for primer, so I'll back tape the edge of the tailgate, and then we only want to primer the areas that have been sanded with 320 grit sandpaper. I did straighten a couple other little dents off camera. The primer we're going to use today is the Roberlo ME1. This is a 2K urethane primer, and typically a 2K urethane primer is the best primer to use on a repair like this. It sands easy. It's a high build primer. It's made to go over bare metal. This particular primer it's a direct to metal primer. I am using the 3M Performance gun with a 1.3 tip, I believe. And this gun works out well. It's very versatile. I've got my air pressure set very low, and we just want to put 2 good coats of urethane primer on it. This will give us enough material so we can block sand this out before we get ready to paint. Coming up in the next episode, I'll share with you how to block sand this and paint it. I hope you enjoyed this content and found it helpful. If you did, do me a favor, like and comment down below. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. If you want to build your skill and increase your knowledge, check out one of these videos now. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.